Hello and welcome to the Full Scottish here on Broadcasting Scotland. My name's Kenny McBride and I'm joined today by two excellent guests. Firstly by writer and academic Effie Samara. Effie, how are you doing today?
I'm good, thank you, Kenny.
And on the other side of me, a guest I don't think I've ever spoken to before, Fulton MacGregor MSP, the MSP for Coatbridge and Chryston. Fulton, how are you doing today?
Not bad, Kenny. Thank you very much for having me on.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you. Now, before we get on to the rest of today's stories, we do have the coronavirus statistics update for you. This is from yesterday, obviously. Today's figures will be published in a couple of hours. So yesterday there were 123 new confirmed cases of COVID-19 in Scotland, but again, no new reported deaths. A total of 461,167 people in Scotland have been tested. Of these, 441,439 were negative, 19,728 were positive. There were 246 people in hospital last night, 2 of whom were in intensive care. And the number of patients who have tested positive and then died still stands now at 2,492. So just very, very quickly, Fulton, this is 123 new cases in a day is more than we've had in a while. Those numbers have been creeping up a wee bit. What do you think that means for us? Do we need to maybe ease back on the lockdown restrictions being lifted?
Well, I think as the First Minister pointed out yesterday, the numbers are certainly a cause for concern, but they are around a specific cluster in the northeast where I believe that action has been taken, robust measures have been put in place, and I think we do need to see the huge increase in numbers in that context. However, it clearly shows, as other clusters, including one in my own constituency of Coatbridge, it shows that this virus is very much not away. We need to remain on guard at all times and stick to the rules that are in place in order to defeat it and not see a resurgence.
Mm-hmm. And Effie, I mean, the other side of that, of course, is there have been very, very few deaths in Scotland for the last month or two now, and we seem to be having a pretty effective test and trace system in place. Do these increases still worry you?
Of course, and to be honest with you, with my daughter back in school last week, it's a very personal issue, as I'm sure it is for hundreds of thousands of people across the country, and in the coming weeks also in England, with family of mine as well and close friends. So it's a situation that, at least in Scotland, we seem to be controlling very, very well, because as we know, the test and trace system is part of the NHS. More worryingly, in England, where it's been commissioned to Circle, we've obviously had reports that less than 50% of cases have been traced. So the disparity there will be visible, and as we go into autumn, let's hope it doesn't get any worse. But as Fulton just mentioned, it seems to be under control. Most of this is linked to the Two Sisters factory, I believe, but there have been some other cases which are yet to be identified. So by all means, don't forget that we're not out of the woods yet. This pandemic is very, very present. It's with us. So just be mindful.
Yeah. And as always, for our viewers at home, we do remind you, if you are showing any symptoms at all, please do book a test as quickly as you can. It helps all of us to keep this under control. It's not fun for anybody to experience this illness, but you can help everyone if you get a test as soon as you can. But we move to our first real story of the day today, and this was Boris Johnson's holiday. Boris Johnson decided to spend a bit of time in the Highlands, supposedly in Applecross. He had a holiday cottage, for which for some reason he then put a tent down at the end of the garden, apparently to look like he was out on a camping holiday. But Fulton, he's now apparently had to leave. So the big question is, was it the midgies or was it the gnats?
Well, I'd probably say it's almost certainly been the midges. So, I mean, in all seriousness, it's good that the Prime Minister decided to come to Scotland for a staycation. Why not? It's the most beautiful and stunning place in the world, in my humble opinion. And obviously, I've seen some of the media coverage saying that he feels he's had to go. That's obviously a decision that he's made himself. I don't know the details of that and what's led up to that decision. But one thing that I would say is that he's entitled to a holiday, and I'm glad that he came here. But he's made his own decision to go down to go back home, and I don't know if he's maybe or possibly not him, but others are trying to make more out of that than there is.
Now, a number of people have kind of tried to blame the independence movement and the SNP in various ways. Somebody accused Ian Blackford of having spread the word because he's local. Obviously on Skye, I don't think he's that local to Applecross. People perhaps not realising quite how big his constituency is. Do you believe that anyone in the SNP had anything to do with this story getting out?
I don't believe that there's any truth to that. I don't think that any SNP politician, certainly not Ian Blackford, would be responsible for that. I think what Boris, we need to remember is Boris Johnson's the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, so wherever he goes, he is going to have people who disagree with his decisions, and he's made some pretty difficult decisions over recent times. I did see a tweet today from somebody saying, they were ashamed that Boris Johnson felt they had to leave Scotland. We don't know the reasons why he decided to leave the trip early. We don't know if the reasons that he would give for that are validated or not either. So, I go back to what I said earlier, that he came to Scotland for holiday. I'm pleased that he did that, and he's made his own decision to go home.
Mm-hmm. Effie, Neil Oliver, another noted unionist figure with a lot to say for himself at times. He said that it was terrible that Johnson felt unsafe in Scotland, and again tried to lay this at the feet of nationalists.
Amy, I'm losing you.
Oh, can you hear me now?
No.
Can you hear me at all now?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry about this.
No problem. That's fine. And Neil Oliver, I was saying, who's well-known unionist, has said that it was terrible that the Prime Minister felt unsafe in Scotland. But there's actually no evidence that anybody actually tried to harass him at this holiday home. There's no evidence that anybody has even tried to kind of physically identify where he is. People obviously know where that cottage is, but what do you think is behind this story that somehow it's a threat, it's dangerous, it's people trying to victimise the Prime Minister, that somehow he's under threat just by being in Scotland? Where's that story coming from, do you think?
Well, I could write a book about the comedy called Boris Johnson, but I'm not going to do that just now. Okay, first of all, let's just be very clear about this. The people that identified Boris were the Daily Mail. I don't see the SNP anywhere featuring anywhere on this. So he was found by the Daily Mail in this bizarre photograph where he appears to have gained an awful lot of weight in the last week. Fine, great food up here. I completely understand that. And then he's the lady that he's accompanied by, whatever her name is, Carrie, and himself today, also on social media. Another bizarre photograph appeared with him holding a baby, which is considerably smaller than the same baby that was photographed about 5 or 6 weeks ago at 10 Downing Street. So again, babies, do funny things. People's bodies do funny things. So who am I to comment? But on a serious note, this Prime Minister, I think, will be notable in his absence. He has presided over possibly the worst disasters to have faced this country in the last 80 years. So we're talking about the combined calamity of Brexit and obviously COVID, which was not in his control, but he could have done a lot more about. We have seen countries of comparable size face much less by way of death, way better dealing with things like track and trace, with testing programs, with lockdown and all this stuff. And what's interesting, Kenny, is that I have said before on this program that this is a PR government. This is not really a functioning government. And you have all this ideology behind it. So whenever you see this man, Boris the Faithful Johnson, appear, people, I think, reasonably have their doubts whether he's actually there or whether this is some sort of photoshopped opportunity. No one knows where he is or why he's there. We have seen what we've witnessed in the last couple of weeks was obviously to do with exams. You know, the Scottish government, and again, I will not be a defender of the algorithm system. I will not be a defender. You know, as you know, I'm in Rugby University researching under the umbrella of the School of Education. So I have a lot to say about that. I'm not going to do that just now, but academics and observers and others have published huge amounts of work on assessments and on how you deal with people. But again, COVID is a completely unprecedented event. So what we've had in Scotland was an immediate reaction to the algorithm to basically this sort of assessment and the differentiation between teachers' classifications and grades and that which was produced by the algorithm. In comparison to that, England has been abysmal, and Williamson is known for, you know, being a very evasive figure and a very divisive figure. And again, strategically, Boris Johnson disappeared from the scene at this particular moment, being, I will echo Marina Hyde here, the Tamara Eccleston of Westminster. You know, he's on holiday every other week. So it's not funny, but you can only giggle on a Sunday morning. What else can you do, you know?
Yeah, Fulton, on that note, Boris Johnson, he was away in Mustique at the start of this crisis, didn't want to cut his holiday short. He was ill for a time, in fairness, and spent a wee bit of time each evening recovering from that. But then he didn't seem to come back. He seems to have been at number 10 very, very little. And now, while there's lockdown restrictions across the north of England, potentially new lockdown restrictions in Birmingham, he's jetted off to the north of Scotland. Is this Prime Minister just not willing to do a proper hard shift of work?
Well, I think that's the ultimate question, John. You do mention that obviously had a period of illness during the COVID-19 situation, but of course he did also have a couple of holidays, as you mentioned as well. And I think the best way that I look at it is the contrast between him and our own First Minister is really night and day. And I think that people can see that. People in Scotland can see it. People in the rest of the United Kingdom can see it. And I think in their heart of hearts, our unionists, you know, they also know it as well. Our union MSPs, they know it as well. The contrast has been there. Nicola Sturgeon's been available to the media, the public, day in, day out, setting out a clear, coherent message. And Boris Johnson, as at most times, you know, not been seen. He's making more headlines for his holidays than for some of the leadership that he's shown. So I think that tells us all that we need to know.
Yeah. Well, we move across the Atlantic now to thinking about another leader with questionable hair choices. And Donald Trump, of course, is the current president of the United States. But this week, the Democratic Party held its nominating convention and nominated Joe Biden. Everybody knew that was going to happen. A couple of weeks ago, we learned he was going to nominate Kamala Harris, the California senator, as his vice presidential candidate. The Democratic convention was all held online. Obviously, the coronavirus has meant that it couldn't be the big mass gathering that it normally is. But it does seem to have been very successful. A lot of people were very impressed, particularly with Harris's speech. So, Effie, I'll come to you first on this. I don't know if you caught any of what was happening in the Democratic convention, but do you think Biden and Harris is the team that can defeat Donald Trump?
I would hope so. Donald Trump's time, if you like, as an epoch has marked the beginning of modern tragedy of the 21st century. So we've had 2016, we've had the double tragedies of Brexit and Donald Trump. Obviously, you know, when it comes to ideology, certain people will take a different view. But as we've discussed previously on the program, and this is my area of research as well, the rise of the neoconservative movement, which historically is a first since the end of the Second World War. There's always been neo-fascist, neo-Nazi movements emerge, across Europe. We've had this even in parts of the Middle East, and in America, the white supremacists have always been present. However, there was always some sort of opprobrium and shame associated with openly admitting to being part of such movements. What Donald Trump has done is he has remarketed vicious right-wing neo-fascist ideology as normal, and with aided by people like Bannon, who used to be very good. Let's hope that the recent arrest somehow clipped his wings, but you don't know with people like Bannon. He has been very good at militarizing and weaponizing the ideology. He's been to Europe with close links to the German neo-Nazi movement, to Marine Le Pen, to the Italians, with Salvini, and a personal friend of Bannon's, also a friend of Johnson's. So this has been a very dark period in the history, as it were, of the world in this century. So let us hope. I think Harris will mark a beginning. This is my hope, at least. Symbolically, this is a woman who has shown herself to be intellectually quite brilliant. Some people may have some issues with the position she's taken as district attorney. And again, you know, I'm here to listen to these concerns. But in terms of what she represents, and in terms of, obviously, Biden may not have been everyone's, top choice as a progressive. But again, compared to Donald Trump, we're talking about an emergency situation here. I think what's very, very encouraging is there appears to be a fatigue in America, and especially the way he has dealt with COVID. He has alienated a lot of his base. People have lost their lives. We're talking about, I believe, 30 million Americans who we're looking at, they're going to fail to pay rental payments or house payments over the next couple of months. We're talking about a situation where people are literally facing destruction and bankruptcy and poverty way more than they had been used to previously. Also, even touching on the middle classes. So he'll have very, very little room to maneuver. Let's hope it's a new beginning. I mean, we badly need it, Now,
Effie mentioned Steve Bannon there, who was arrested this week after the charity that was set up to raise money to help build Trump's border wall. It was discovered that Bannon and some of his friends have allegedly been funneling money out of that organization to themselves, despite having claimed they wouldn't take any sort of salary from it at all. What do you think this, Steve Bannon's been this kind of linchpin in a lot of these right-wing movements around the world, as Effie pointed out. What difference do you think it makes to the world if Steve Bannon ends up in jail, Fulton?
Well, I mean, clearly that's a decision for the American justice system. And, you know, I do as an MSP sitting in the Scottish Parliament, although I take an interest in it, in American politics, I always go back to the number one principle that whoever they decide to lead the country and represent them is a decision for them. You know, at a personal level, I would like to see the Democrats candidates do well the next election. That's all it is. It's merely a personal opinion on it. And in terms of the self-revelation that you talked about just there in the question, you know, that, as I say, I think that's obviously for the American court, the American justice system to come to a conclusion.
And there's also been this ongoing issue around postal voting in the US. The president has continually said that he doesn't think it's safe. He doesn't think it's trustworthy. Meanwhile, the Democrats have been trying very hard to push it so that people aren't queuing up at polling stations in the middle of a pandemic. The House passed a bill this week to make universal postal voting possible. It does look like that will stall in the Senate because the Senate's still Republican controlled. What do you think this does, Fulton, for the legitimacy of the election? That Trump seems to be doing a lot just now to threaten, to kind of argue that the election can't be legitimate. Do you think he's planning to just try and squat in the White House?
Well, I think what you described there is pretty symptomatic of the current pandemic. The Americans are about to win an election when clearly there is still a real threat from the pandemic. They are obviously now, employing the idea of having more postal votes, and then obviously, as you say, President Trump is issuing concerns about that. I think this is probably a conversation that we may also be having ahead of our elections in the Scottish Parliament next May. I mean, for example, people have already asked me, like, how will campaigning work? How will we be voting? This sort of thing. So obviously, there's a wee bit of time between now and next May. But should the pandemic still be with us at that point, we might be having similar conversations at that point, and you might find that there's parties in Scotland who take a similar view to the Democrats and say, look, let's try and have more people on postal votes or electronic voting or whatever the case may be, more like postal votes, of course. And then maybe people would take the Republican stand we have in America just now and feel that might be unsafe in some way. So I think what we're seeing in America is a country that's grappling with a pandemic, probably fair to say struggling to cope with the pandemic, yet it's going into a very crucial election as well. So, we might find ourselves in a similar position next year, but hopefully, we've turned the corner in terms of the pandemic.
Yeah, fingers crossed for that. It's certainly going to be an interesting election for all of us, I think. We move now, though, to Russia, or rather, strictly speaking, we move to Germany, where Alexei Navalny, the opposition politician and anti-corruption activist, is now in a hospital in Berlin being treated for suspected poisoning. He was allegedly... This poisoning happened just before or just after he got on a plane. The plane then had to make an emergency landing after he was taken seriously ill. The Russian doctors and government seemed resistant to letting him be moved to Germany for treatment, but then they changed their mind. He was moved last night, and we are told now that he is in a stable condition. But this is an ongoing thing in Russia, this poisoning of people. Some of those poisonings have even happened in the UK. Effie, if I could come to you first. What do you think the West should be doing about this country where murders of journalists are not uncommon, where anti-corruption activists, opposition politicians can be poisoned, assassinated, almost with impunity. Is there something that the rest of the world should be doing to kind of tame Putin's aggression towards his own people?
It's a difficult question, Kenny. And if you look into the history of this, obviously Putin operates on the basis of what Mike Russell termed as, the other day when you had him on the program, which was a fantastic program last Friday, he termed this as myth-making. Now, that was in relation, obviously, to the Brexit negotiations with the British government, but I find that I'm not a historian by trade, but obviously a lot of the work that I do is based on historical observation. Putin is trained by the KGB, and he also ideologically belongs to the whole idea of making the Russia great again. Now, we may have a very long conversation about what Russia is in relation to the former Soviet Union, but I think in his own mind there is a big confusion about what he sees as Russia and the former Soviet Union, so the two at times do merge. And he sees this as an empire which could potentially revive itself. Now, we know over the last 15 years, vast amounts of money have been spent across the Western Hemisphere, and we could name specific people and countries, France being one of them, and Germany as well, and they have been able to also infiltrate the United States. And the head of this movement is Donald Trump, Manafort, and all his associates, most of whom are now ended up in jail. They all have very, very close links to the Kremlin. So what they've been very, very good at is moving away from the old military style, if you like, strategy of controlling the world and endorsing a new model. Now, you could talk about anything between Cambridge Analytica, Facebook, the practices deployed by all these very large organizations. And if you look into the workings of them, inevitably, somewhere along the line, you will find a Russian connection. And I will just say this one thing, 55 Tufton Street. Most of these people, again, have very close links to Russia. So Putin's system, if you like, his strategy has worked in that particular way. He has been quite successful, and this is why we're today confronting the Brexit situation and what have you. Now, poisonings and disappearances are a well-known phenomenon of any authoritarian state. In the former Soviet Union, it used to be, again, something that you could not oppose the state. It was considered as high treason. So the ways and the methodology are already present in how you deal with people who raise their voice. And I think Putin has followed the rule book of what you do when people begin to annoy you. Now, one of the reasons why he doesn't like the EU and he would like to see it disbanded and dissolved is because the EU is effectively the only body in its magnitude and its institutionality and its structure that can counteract Russia right on its doorstep. Let's not forget how the Ukraine situation has been dealt with, how the Hungary and Poland have become members of the EU, how the former Balkan states, which were all under Soviet rule, have now become Europeanized. Putin does not like that. It's to him, it's anathema. So what we can do, I think, as believers in a democratic process, is simply to support the EU and its institutions and all the branches of the democratic system to counteract this, and the EU is powerful enough to do it. And this is what worries him. You see now the speed with which Navalny has been taken to Germany. This was not done by Germany as an independent, no, it's an independent state, but this is very much part of the whole EU framework. So Putin dreads it, and I think there can be reinforcement of the European rules. I think the Commission are already looking into this. There is talk of counteracting fake news. There is talk about how they will legislate against far-right movements and movements looking to limit people's freedom of speech, people's ability to full enfranchisement and all this stuff, human rights, all of which is what Putin does not like. So there is a lot of a lot of room for improvement. But I think also, hopefully, Biden's election to the presidency of the United States will also be another pillar in combating this expansive view of the world that Putin has acquired in the last few years.
Now, we stay in that general region. The protests in Belarus still continue. It's 2 weeks now since they had their election, where the dictator Lukashenko allegedly won 80% of the vote. Few people, if any, truly believe that he got 80% of the vote. His opponent, Svetlana Tikhanovskaya, is now in voluntary exile in Lithuania. Now, Fulton, the SNP, Ian Blackford wrote to the Foreign Secretary urging what they call Magnitsky, that's the word I'm looking for, yes, Magnitsky-style sanctions. These are sanctions on Belarusian officials and whatnot in the UK for human rights abuses abroad. Do you think that the reaction of the international community to the results in Belarus, and combined with the protests by the people in Minsk and elsewhere, do you think they can actually depose this dictator?
Well, I hope so. The reaction from the international community and the reaction from politicians across Europe, at least, has been pretty strong, and I've very much echo the calls of Ian Blackford that you mentioned earlier. I mean, what we've seen in Belarus was fundamentally an attack on democracy and an attack on human rights. And as a nation, we need to stand up. We need to stand up to dictatorship when we see it, and for everybody who live in these situations and not having their voice heard and having their human rights, effectively trampled on. So I very much call on tough action to be taken in order to try and address the situation. What the final outcome will be, actually suggesting the question, who knows? But we've got to make sure that we play our part. And given that international affairs is reserved to the UK Parliament, it's right that Ian Blackford, on behalf of the SNP, has called on the UK a tough stance on this.
Mm-hmm. Well, we will obviously keep reporting on what happens in Belarus. Those, as we say, those protests do continue. It's been pretty much every day for the last couple of weeks. There's talk of things like a general strike and whatnot. We will keep an eye on that story as we progress. But we come back to Scotland now, and we've had two polls this week, one showing 54% for yes, and one showing 55% for yes, a full reversal of the 2014 result. So Fulton, I'll come to you first on this. I mean, obviously this is something you've been fighting for as long as you've been in politics. How does it make you feel to see this consistent results in polls of over 55%, of over 50% of people supporting an independent Scotland?
It is really, really, really encouraging, but I suppose you would expect me to say as well, it's not surprising. we from 2014 and that very dreadful night, but our hopes were dashed. Those on the Yes campaign, we've noticed very much a shift to Yes across that time. So hearing that the polls are at 55, 45, to me personally, feels about right, about where the public are, certainly when I speak to people in my job and going about my business. That's where I feel things are at. There's no time to be complacent, though. We need to continue to demonstrate that Scotland would benefit from being an independent country, that we would make choices that would benefit people who live and work here. And I think that, over the last year or 2 years, we've certainly demonstrated that even the COVID pandemic is tragic and terrible as it has been. It has, again, as I answered in an earlier question from you, it has shown the difference in approach the two countries with two very different governments can take to the exact same situation. So it's actually demonstrated that. And I think that people are certainly telling me that they've seen that, they've noticed that, and they're wondering what else we could do as a fully independent nation. A fully independent nation that's a good neighbour and still connected to the rest of these isles. So, it's very, very encouraging, I have to say, very pleasing. But I still think there's a long way to go.
Yeah. Effie, which do you think is more important in this change? Is it to do with actual campaigning, which has been ongoing on some level really ever since 2014, but especially since the Brexit vote in 2016? Is it more to do with these diverging leadership styles that we've talked about between the First Minister and the Prime Minister? Or is it this looming Brexit and people have finally realised just how bad things might get and realised that their only chance is now to have an independent Scotland join the EU as its own country?
It's a combination. I must say, obviously, in regards to COVID, a very unwelcome unfolding of events. No one was expecting a global pandemic, which has claimed the lives of so many hundreds of thousands of people across the globe. So, but what the crisis will do, Kenny, you and Fulton and I and all our viewers would know is a crisis will show you real value. So, it will take, my maternal uncles, my mum was one of 6, she had 5 brothers, and they were all officers of the Merchant Navy. Now, my Uncle George always used to say, the seas are rough, you see a real cup. Now, and this is what COVID has done for Nicola Sturgeon. Although I'm sure she every waking moment of her day, she wishes she wouldn't have had to deal with it, because it's been a horrible thing. But what it has demonstrated is that the intentions and the reality of the British right-wing government, the Cameron administration, the May administration, and obviously now Johnson, who's actually dealt with COVID. It has the emperor is naked. We have seen a man who has missed 5 consecutive Cobra meetings amidst an event that has claimed the lives of tens of thousands of British citizens. Whereas we have seen a woman in Scotland who has tirelessly and indefatigably stood up every single day and owned her policy, confronted the tragedies, shown herself to be human, shown herself to be an emotional and compassionate human being, shown herself to be capable in the face of adversity. Let us not forget what happened with the officer who she was asked to resign, Catherine Calderwood, who are actually, if you compare this to the Cummings comedies and things like that, she acted immediately dealt with it, whilst at the same time dealing with the daily demands of all the other things, education, health, everything that lands on her plate. So not once has she complained, not once has she been on holiday, not once has she been out to accuse other people of things, and rightly so. She has found herself to have shone through this whole negative thing, which has been COVID. Now Brexit will be the crowning glory of the British Empire too. I mean, this is gonna be crazy. And again, I will refer to your interview with Mike Russell, which I was just watching with my daughter just before I came on this program. Now, we have seen the horrors of what they're proposing, the internal, notwithstanding obviously the internal market, but obviously the loss, in fact, the loss of status of a devolved government, which was previously protected by the European Union. In the absence of that institutional framework, in addition to things like food shortages, environmental problems, human rights losses, pharmaceutical issues, the loss of research and collaboration between European nations and Britain, we stand to lose hard fought for rights and the conventions and the constitutional safeguards of devolution. So a lot of the hard work, I think, for the independence movement has been done by Westminster. And Boris is welcome in Scotland. He can come back if he wants. He does. We're doing very well, thank you. So it's obviously it's not a laughing matter, but it's very, very good news. Even if you look at the examples of other Scandinavian nations or New Zealand or other nations, a small nation can look after her citizens in ways that a huge structure, which is very feudal in its workings, cannot. And it has shown itself to be wanting and bad through the last 3 or 4 years.
Fulton, these polls have kind of been creeping up for the last wee while. Do you think we are now at a point where that is now a settled position, if you like, that a majority support independence? Or do you think there is still a long way to go to cement that? Are you concerned that that's going to evaporate once a real campaign gets underway?
No, I'd probably think the opposite, actually. I think that we are moving towards a settled opinion. It's not, we're not quite there yet. It's only a handful of polls. What will always go down in history is a very difficult time. But I think what's really encouraging within the polls themselves is the number that we're talking about when it comes to young people. We're talking about some of the samples being that up to about 75% of young folk want independence, and that tells me that that's very much the trajectory that we're going on. And there's no politician of any political persuasion should be finding themselves in a position where they are trying to thwart the will of such a large majority of their future generations. And I actually go back to something that happened in the 2014 election. My partner's gran, who very sadly passed away this year, a lovely woman. We were talking to her about how she might vote, and it was very clear that she was inclined to vote no. That was the argument that she was persuaded in. And all her granddaughters and grandsons were all voting yes, as well as the in-laws like myself. And not long after the election, I voted no. Not long after the election, she says, I just wanted you all to know that I didn't agree with it, but I voted yes, because at the end of the day, it's what you all wanted, and you're the ones that are going to be here for the next 40, 50 years. And that really stuck with me. I heard a lot of people saying that online and such like over the course. But that was the one time that I'd actually heard somebody physically say that in person. And I think that's got to be something that other people will start taking into account. When you're hearing the future generations of this country are very much behind the idea of an independent Scotland. I think that we are on a trajectory where it will very soon become the settled opinion of people for any Prime Minister in the UK Parliament to deny us another opportunity to have a vote on that. I think would be a very, very grave mistake indeed.
Mm-hmm. Now, of course, there are people in Scotland who would very much like to campaign against another referendum, campaign against independence. And this week we saw Jamie Blackett, the deputy leader of George Galloway's Alliance for Unity. He's a old Etonian arch Tory, gentleman farmer is how he describes himself. But this week he said that the SNP was like the political wing of the independence movement. He said, like Sinn Féin with another wing. He's previously referred to the SNP having a paramilitary wing. He says that this movement promotes civil unrest and intimidates the population. This kind of ties back a wee bit, Effie, with what we were saying about Neil Oliver and some of the stories coming out to attack the SNP over the location of Boris Johnson. Do you think this ramping up of language, trying to make out that the SNP are Nazis, or they're violent, they're all these terrible things, do you think it's an effective strategy? And perhaps more importantly, do you think the aim is to demonize the SNP in such a way that people feel they can't support them?
It's a rhetorical device, what we call in philosophy and speech act and probably in law as well. You have these rhetorical devices which are designed to create a violent emotional impacts and in reactions in people. So you stir up emotion, you present violent images, you volunteer emotive language, and this is what you aim to do. It's obviously something which I'm sure Cummings, or am I a bit frozen?
No, you're still with us. Okay. I think we've lost Effie for a moment. We'll hopefully get her back shortly. But Fulton, just to come to you, this kind of violent rhetoric, or rather rhetoric about nationalist violence, we know from the 2014 referendum that almost all the violence that actually took place was from the no side. We know that, well, we've seen, for example, on the 19th of September in George Square, we saw them giving Nazi salutes. And yet the accusations are always that it's the SNP and the independence movement that are racists and Nazis and whatnot. What do you think the purpose is behind this rhetoric, and what do you think the reaction of the Scottish people will be the more they hear it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to comment on the actions of those who would support the union and who would fight for a no vote, because it's pretty clear, and we've seen it over the last week, that they're rattled, and when your opponent's rattled, they're likely to try and change the goalposts. As we've seen with some of the talk about how the referendum might work, and go on the attack. The Scottish people have seen the SNP in action, for over 3 parliaments now. They've seen the SNP in action at Westminster. They've seen the SNP in action, during various referendums. And the Scottish people are no mugs, and they will not buy into, attacks of that nature on the, on the party of the wider movement. So I think that the opposition are fully rattled. I think they're more likely to make more mistakes going forward that will put people off their cause rather than bring people on board. And I'm just quite happy as an SNP MSP and activist to continue, fighting the cause of independence on the positives of what independence will bring to this country.
Mm-hmm. Now, we also saw Galloway's crew, which apparently now includes Andrew Neil, who I saw somebody, I think it might have been Galloway himself, mooting as a potential First Minister of Scotland if he came and joined Galloway's gang. They talked about this idea of a sort of ethnic franchise where anyone born in Scotland but living elsewhere in the UK would be entitled to a vote in an independence referendum. What do you make of this new angle that they're trying to spin?
It really, as I said earlier, it's changing the goalposts. It seems, a wee bit like desperation. And, but at the end of the day, people are allowed to give an opinion. I remember during the 2014 referendum as well, there was talk about should people living in other parts of the UK and indeed at one point in the world be entitled to a vote. I've got a very good friend who lives in Australia, and he texted me during the 2014 referendum wondering if there was any way he would be able to get a vote, because he'd certainly be voting for an independent Scotland. But, I think that the situation that we had, the vote with the people who live and work here, was the right one, and I think that that's going to be extremely difficult to argue against the future referendum. But people are entitled to their opinion, they're entitled to express that on Twitter and other social media forums. But I think that the public will see what it is. We'll see it for what it is. Sorry, and that is the case. And both sides won the referendum on last occasion. The tide is very much shifting for a variety of reasons, and they are trying to change the goalposts in their favour. And folk don't like that. They just don't.
Yeah. Well, we will obviously keep looking at this as we get closer and closer to next year's election. But finally today, I just wanted to mention that the Waverley is back on the open water. The 70-year-old boat, it's the world's only seagoing paddle steamer left in action. Effie, I think we've got you back now, haven't we?
Yes, we have.
Yes, excellent. So how does it make you feel to see the old Waverley back on the water?
You have got to fill me in on that, Kenny. You've caught me there. Can you?
I'll go to Fulton on that then.
Go to Fulton on that, yeah.
Fulton, how are you feeling now? You can see the Waverley back in action.
Well, I'm going to have to be honest here and admit I'm in the exact same position. So I was just actually Googling there when you were saying, but no, and it's great news. It really is, and it's as you say, it's been with us a long time, and for it to have it back in water, I'm sure that it's going to bring joy to many folk, and it's a source of pride for all of us across the country.
Yeah, absolutely. Effie, I won't come to you for any more depth on it unless you really want to say something. But yeah, it's a well known. I would have thought you would have heard of it. 70-year-old paddle steamer, the only one apparently left in the world that still does go to sea. It had some repairs done on its boiler, but those repairs have been completed and it's back out in action now. So I think good news for tourists, unfortunately.
Good news for tourists, yes. Yeah. That's my homework for the afternoon. I'll have to look that up.
Yeah, so all we need now is to get more tourists back out and about. But to do that, obviously, we have to get the pandemic under control first, which takes us back to that beginning story about please do book a test if you are showing any symptoms. That is just about all we have time for today. So thank you very much to Effie and to Fulton for joining us today. It's been a real pleasure, even with some of the technical struggles we've had today. And thank you at home for joining us as well. The whole point of these shows is for you to join us and be a part of this. So please do, if you can, support us, first of all, by following us on Twitter at Broadcast Scot, finding us on Facebook, finding our channel on YouTube, subscribing there, liking the videos, clicking the bell icon as well is great because it keeps you updated on when new shows are available. If you're able to support us financially as well, we would love you to be able to do that. If you can, please do go to broadcastingscotland.scot/register, sign up there as a supporter, and your £5 a month helps us to do everything that we do here at Broadcasting Scotland. And finally, if you'd like to get involved here at Broadcasting Scotland, we have lots of things that need to be done, both in front of and behind the camera. Once again, today we're one person down, and it makes things very difficult for one person to run everything here, which is what we've got happening just now. So if we were always looking for help, if you're able to help in any way, we can train you. If you don't have any skills, if you do have skills, even better, because we can just show you where to sit, and you can get to work right away. But we'd love to get more people involved here. It's the only way we're going to be able to really build the kind of broadcaster that we believe Scotland deserves and that Broadcasting Scotland can be. So that is all we have time for. Gordon will be back again tomorrow with another Scotland at 7. But so all that's left for me now is to say thank you once again to Effie Samara and to Fulton MacGregor. Thank you to you again for joining us. I'll be back on Tuesday. But until then, have a great day. Goodbye.